Once I attended a child's birthday party. As a special treat, they had a man come in with a whole collection of reptiles for the children to see and to touch and to hold and to pet. When I arrived, to my horror, the first thing I saw was an old nun I knew. Around her neck was an enormous and very much alive boa constrictor. In my shock, I cried out, "What a brave snake!" As we hear about Jesus touching and curing the leper, I don't know which to marvel at most. The courage of Jesus, who dared to reach out and touch the unclean leper, or the audacity of the leper himself, who, breaking all rules of religion and society, placed himself in the presence of Jesus. As we know, in those days, leprosy was a terrifying disease, and those afflicted with it had to live in complete isolation, never allowed to come into the presence of other people. They carried bells which they had to ring when they saw anyone coming close, so that the others would go the other way. This man would not have been allowed to be on the same road as Jesus and the crowd following him, yet he had the audacity to do so. We can imagine the shock of that crowd, the audacity of that man, and the courage of Jesus. Why did Jesus have to reach out and touch the man? He could just as easily have healed him with a word and from a distance, as he did so many other times. But he felt obliged to reach out and touch this unclean man. Why? Jesus was always very fond of shocking people. He always loved to ignore and demolish the barriers erected by religion and society. There is an old story about the Prince of Wales, who was later to become King of England. This was the time of the British Empire, and the prince visited the capital of India, New Delhi. Upon arriving, he found huge barriers erected to keep away the crowds of outcast people who wanted to catch a glimpse of royalty. The prince shook the hands of a few political dignitaries and then looked over to those barriers and saw the crowds of outcast poor people. The prince cried out, "Take down those barriers." Immediately the barriers were removed, and the throngs of outcasts had free access to the prince. Sometime later, when the prince once again visited this same city, he was greeted by a crowd of 10,000 outcasts, carrying a welcome banner which read, "The Prince of the Outcasts." In Christ, we have the original Prince of the Outcasts. Outcast himself, he found himself rejected by the world he had come to love and to save, eventually being nailed to a cross. Prince of Outcasts, like the Prince of Wales, cried out, "Take down those barriers." We are told of Jesus encountering lepers. We are told of Jesus encountering prostitutes. We are told of Jesus encountering adulteresses, tax collectors, sinners of every ilk. Yet I tell you, Jesus never met a leper. He never met a prostitute, never met an adulteress, never met a tax collector or a sinner. For in those people, Jesus saw not a leper, not a prostitute, not a sinner. He saw only a sister, a brother, a fellow human being longing to be touched, longing to be loved. There were never any outcasts in Jesus' presence. In my room hangs a haunting painting of a prison scene. Inscribed on it are the famous words of The Ballad of Reading Jail. And alien tears will fill for him pity's long broken urn, for his mourners will be outcast men, and outcasts always mourn. There are outcasts all around us mourning, lepers all around us suffering a silent loneliness and secret sorrow. The feared, the hated, the neglected, the marginalized, the shunned, all those people who have suffered a loss, a traumatic blow, and who feel the terrible isolation of hidden pain, unable to be touched even by those closest to them. These are the lepers, the outcasts of our day. We are, all of us, outcasts, all lepers at one time or another, all desperate to be touched, yet afraid of allowing ourselves to be touched, all terrified by the barriers which we and others have erected. Hear then the shocking cry of the Prince of Outcasts. Take down those barriers. Take them down, that we too may have the audacity of the leper to cast ourselves into the presence of God, allow ourselves to be touched by the Prince of Outcasts, and find that precisely that which seemed to cast us out, by that marvelous touch, has cast us in.